This is a dark and disturbing Apple Iceberg Explained. If you've never watched an iceberg video before, the items at the top of the iceberg are commonly known facts about a certain topic, and as we get lower in the iceberg, the information is less commonly known, to the point where I'll be covering some info that almost no one knows about, like for example the story about a secret iPod project developed for the US government. With over 50 entries, this iceberg video is huge. So let's not waste any time and let me explain the entire Apple iceberg. Tier 1. The top. The original Apple logo, created by Apple's co-founder Ronald Wayne in 1976, featured a detailed illustration of Isaac Newton sitting under a tree with an apple hanging above his head. It symbolized enlightenment and discovery. However, Steve Jobs found it too complex for branding, leading to its replacement within a year. If you look closer to Apple's version of the open book emoji, you can spot a hidden quote. It comes from Apple's famous 1997 Think Different campaign. Here's to the crazy ones, the misfits, the rebels, the troublemakers, the round pegs in the square holes, the ones who see things differently. They are not fond of rules, and they have no respect for the status quo. You can quote them, disagree with them, glorify or vilify them. About the only thing you can do is. The quote celebrates innovation and rebellious creativity, hallmarks of Apple's identity. By the way, we will talk more about Easter eggs later in this video. John Appleseed is Apple's go-to default name, a fictional persona quietly embedded in product demos, marketing screenshots, and default contact lists since early 2000s. If you've ever watched a keynote, you've probably seen his name somewhere. Actually, the name was inspired by Johnny Appleseed, the 19th century American folk figure known for planting apple trees, a symbol of growth, simplicity, and quiet influence. Apple adopted it as a kind of spiritual alias. Apple always sets the default time on iPhones and iPads in advertisements to 9:41 a.m. Why? This tradition started during the original iPhone unveiling, when Steve Jobs revealed the device exactly at that time. It's a symbolic nod to a historic moment for Apple. 9:41. John Sculley was recruited from Pepsi in 1983 with the infamous question from Jobs: "Do you want to sell sugar water for the rest of your life, or come with me and change the world?" Though initially successful, Sculley later clashed with Jobs, ultimately leading to Jobs' resignation. A lot of people don't know, but Steve Jobs was unexpectedly fired in 1985 due to internal power struggles within the company. The board and John Sculley, the CEO at that time, decided to fire Jobs. However, Steve Jobs didn't let the setback discourage. Instead, he found a new company, Next, a company that focused on developing cutting-edge operating system technologies. Ironically, fate intervened in 1997 when Apple acquired Next, bringing Jobs back to the company. Demo devices in Apple stores run a special version of iOS that loops certain functions, restricts personal data entry, and resets frequently. It is only designed to showcase hardware and key features. If you will try to steal a demo device from the Apple Store, you will not be able to use it like a normal iPhone. So it's a sort of a custom iOS version. In 1984, Apple produced a rather unusual ad video directed by Ridley Scott. The commercial introduced the Macintosh computer in dramatic fashion. The inspiration came from George Orwell's novel 1984. The ad cast Apple as a rebellious force against conformity, symbolized by tech giants like IBM, portrayed as an Orwellian big brother. The 60-second spot showed a dystopian future where workers stare at a massive screen broadcasting authoritarian propaganda. Suddenly, a lone female athlete sprints in and breaks the screen, shattering the image and symbolizing the arrival of a bold new vision for computing, the Macintosh, of course.
On January 24th, Apple Computer will introduce Macintosh. And you'll see why 1984 won't be like 1984.
Tier 2, just below the surface. In 2010, Steve Jobs wrote his famous Thoughts on Flash, criticizing Adobe Flash for being resource-heavy, insecure, and outdated. Apple's refusal to support Flash on iPhones and iPads forced the industry shift to HTML5, contributing to Flash eventual death in 2020.
And there were some good reasons we did that. We got rid of the floppy disk altogether in 1998 with the first iMac. We also got rid of these things called serial and parallel ports, and we were the first to adopt USB, even though Intel had invented it. You first saw it in mass on iMacs. And so we have gotten rid of things. We were one of the first to get rid of optical drives with the MacBook Air. And I think things are moving in that direction as well. And sometimes when we get rid of things like the floppy disk drive on the original iMac, people call us crazy.
Or at least premature, maybe.
No, they call us crazy.
Oh, okay.
Jailbreaking allowed users to bypass Apple's software restrictions. Jay Freeman, also known as Sorik, created Cydia, an unofficial app store offering tweaks and apps not approved by Apple. Jailbreaking was a very important thing in shaping early iOS features, but it declined due to increased security and native OS improvements. By the way, I made a separate video about the history of jailbreaking. According to filmmakers like Ryan Johnson, Apple permits its products only for positive heroes or neutral characters in films and TV. This branding control ensures villains don't use iPhones. By doing that, Apple is influencing storytelling and maintaining a clean brand image. Villains usually use Android devices.
Apple lets film productions use its products on screen, but villains can't have an iPhone on camera. So, in mystery movies, he says anyone you see with an iPhone is not the killer. Apple has yet to comment on this. We should note, back in 2002, a Wired article noted that the good guys in 24 used Macs, while the bad guys used Windows PCs.
A prototype iPhone 4 was left at a bar by an Apple engineer in 2010. It was purchased by Gizmodo website, which published a detailed preview before the phone was officially released. Steve Jobs was so mad that the employee who lost the prototype not only was fired, but also faced some legal consequences. When Steve Jobs showed the iPhone 4 during the keynote, he famously said, "Here is our new iPhone 4, but I bet you've already seen it somewhere." Designed by Apple in California, Apple Book was a 450-photo coffee table book released in 2016. It showcased Apple's design evolution and cost up to $300. Despite its minimalism, the book was seen as a statement of Apple's design-centric philosophy. Nowadays, it's a collector's item and it costs a lot of money. A few years ago, a crazy iOS bug caused iPhone to brick itself automatically when the date was manually set to January 1st, 1970. You could literally kill your iPhone just by setting the date on the 1st of January, 1970. Apple later patched the bug after widespread attention. Hell of a crazy bug. Apple's iTunes terms hilariously include a clause forbidding use of its software in the development of nuclear missile or chemical or biological weapons. It's a standard compliance requirement, but its inclusion in consumer software is often joked about, like, who's sitting there imagining a missile engineer managing their nuclear weapons through iTunes playlists? The iPhone 4 had a flawed antenna design that caused signal drops when held in a certain way. Apple's PR crisis led to a press conference explaining that the issue is minor and affected only a limited amount of iPhones. Apple also provided people with free cases to resolve the issue. When people asked Steve Jobs why their iPhones lose signal, he famously responded, "You're just holding it wrong." Classic Steve. iPhone 6 Plus users discovered their phones could bend under moderate pressure, especially in pockets. Apple initially downplayed the issue but later admitted the issue and even opened a repair program for affected devices. This issue was initially highlighted by Unbox Therapy. Since then, this YouTuber was never invited to Apple's keynotes again, and apparently he's blacklisted by Apple forever. Do you feel like sometimes your iPhone is getting slower and slower with every iOS update? Well, you're not alone. In 2017, Apple officially admitted to slow down older iPhones to prevent unexpected shutdowns due to the battery aging. Well, that's the official statement. The backlash was huge and led to lawsuits, battery replacement discounts, and iOS updates offering performance controls. So yeah, Apple intentionally slowed down iPhones to force people to buy a new one. Tier 3. A few years ago, Apple wanted to integrate a software into iOS to scan people's personal photos on device using a technology called neural hash. This software could potentially identify inappropriate photos in your library and even alert authorities. Although the goal was child safety, critics feared it set a precedent for mass surveillance. Facing a huge backlash from privacy groups, Apple delayed and eventually cancelled the feature. Critics worried that even with on-device scanning, it could be expanded later to border surveillance or lead to false positives that might unfairly flag innocent users. Plus, once you build a backdoor for one purpose, it's hard to control how it's used later. macOS once used a network icon showing a Windows PC with the iconic blue screen of death. It was a playful joke about Windows instability and a symbol of Apple's confidence in their macOS. Well, nowadays, Apple software is so bad that I would say it's the opposite. In 2014, Apple, for some reason, automatically added the U2's album Songs of Innocence to all iTunes libraries. It sparked a huge negative reaction. Many users were annoyed by the unremovable content. Apple responded with a special tool to delete it. I remember I used this tool to remove the album back in the day from my old iPod Touch. By the way, the album Songs of Innocence is one of the most disliked music pieces of all time. Apple's first mobile phone effort was not the iconic iPhone in 2007, but the Motorola Rocker E1 in 2005, aka the iTunes phone. It had limited songs capacity, only 100 songs, and clunky design. The user interface was not designed by Apple and felt outdated. Even Steve Jobs was joking about this product. Its failure prompted Apple to develop the iPhone, setting the stage for its mobile dominance. In 2004, HP and Apple entered a strange partnership. HP would sell rebranded iPod called the Apple iPod from HP. These were identical to regular iPods but featured an HP logo. In exchange, HP pre-installed iTunes on all their Windows PCs, giving Apple a massive distribution boost and pushing iTunes into dominance. But the deal was not very long-lasting. HP wasn't allowed to change the hardware and agreed not to develop a competing music player until a year after the partnership ended. The HP iPod quietly disappeared in 2005. In 2004, Apple released one of its strangest accessories ever, iPod socks, a set of 6 colorful sleeves for your iPod, sold in a nicely packaged box for $29. They had no tech inside and were functionally, well, just socks for your iPod. Steve Jobs himself introduced them during a keynote as a joke, and you know what? People bought them, partly as a joke, partly as a collector's item, and partly because they were peak Apple. Clean design, bright colors, and something absurdly simple. iPod socks were quietly discontinued years later, but they live in the meme culture. Released in 1985, the Apple LaserWriter wasn't flashy, but it created everything. It was one of the first laser printers in the world. Combined with the Macintosh and Adobe software, the LaserWriter gave birth to desktop publishing, a full creative workflow that once required expensive typesetting studios. It was quite expensive, $7,000, around $20,000 by today's money. It was slow by today's standards and mostly found in design studios and schools. Most people remember the Mac. Few remember the LaserWriter, but it printed the future. Apple teamed up with Bandai to create a hybrid gaming and multimedia console that aimed to bring entertainment to the living room in the mid-90s. It was innovative for its time, combining computing and gaming, but ultimately Apple Pippin console stumbled due to a few key reasons: poor marketing and high price. QuickTake is another cool chapter in Apple's history. Released in 1994, QuickTake was among the first computer digital cameras, pretty groundbreaking at the time, when digital photography was still in its infancy. Apple partnered with Kodak to develop it, focusing on ease of use and integrating it with the Macintosh ecosystem. It has a very simple design with no preview screen. You couldn't see your shots immediately. It could store internally about 8 to 32 pictures depending on the model. It connected directly to Macs for easy photo transfer, which was innovative for the time. However, after Steve Jobs returned to Apple in 1997, the company refocused on core products, and QuickTake was discontinued. However, after Steve Jobs returned to Apple in 1997, the company refocused on core products, and QuickTake was discontinued. In 1993, Apple attempted to combine a television and a Mac computer, calling it Macintosh TV. It could switch between computing and watching TV, but not simultaneously. It flopped due to high price and low functionality. Price at $2,100, about $4,300 today, it sold only 10,000 units before discontinued. Critics called it a TV with an identity crisis. In 1986, Apple did something unexpected. They launched a clothing line called the Apple Collection. The merch featured rainbow-striped polo shirts, bomber jackets, trucker hats, tote bags, and other items, all proudly showing the classic rainbow Apple logo. The designs reflected the colorful, optimistic branding of Apple in the mid-80s and aimed to build a fashion brand. Despite the bold branding, the collection was short-lived. By the early 90s, it quietly disappeared. The original 1980s Apple logo t-shirt even sold for $7,950 at auction in 2022, showcasing just how rare and valuable these oddities have become. Interestingly, Steve Jobs hated the line, believing it was not Apple's focus and distracted them from their core mission, making revolutionary technology. Before the iconic iPod click wheel became one of the Apple's most recognizable design elements, the team tested several strange and experimental prototypes. Some early concepts included a mechanical scroll wheel similar to an old rotary phone dial, a simple plus-minus button layout like what later appeared on the first-gen iPod Shuffle, a large trackball-style wheel which was ultimately rejected for being too bulky and impractical. To maintain secrecy and avoid leaks, engineers had to hide the prototypes inside fake electronic enclosures, making them look like everyday gadgets so no one would suspect they were holding the future of portable music. The final design, a touch-sensitive scroll wheel, was inspired by the Bang & Olufsen Biocom 6000 home phone. It's kind of crazy that Apple drew the inspiration from a Danish phone. Tier for obscure and forgotten projects. Apple nearly went bankrupt in the 90s. The downfall started in 1996. Apple was losing $1 billion per year due to overpriced and confusing product lines, for example, Mac models with overlapping features, failed ventures like the Newton and Macintosh clones licensed to third-party manufacturers which cannibalized sales, Windows 95 dominance which offered better compatibility and lower price, But suddenly, Microsoft came with a lifeline. They've announced $100 million investment into Apple to keep the company alive. The deal included a patent cross-licensing agreement and an ending of long-standing lawsuits. A few years ago, the FBI requested Apple to unlock an iPhone 5C linked to a shooting investigation. Craig Federighi said that complying would effectively create a master key compromising the privacy of all users. Consequently, Apple declined the request. In their efforts, the FBI even approached Jay Freeman, the pioneer of jailbreaking. Although the iPhone 5C lacked a secure enclave, a feature present in newer models, iOS 9 encryption still required the passcode. Eventually, the FBI paid approximately $1.3 million to undisclosed hackers, likely Cellbrite, for an exploit to access the device. In response, Apple fortified its security measures, introducing features such as USB restricted mode, which disables data access, along with enhanced Bluetooth and Wi-Fi lockdowns in future iOS updates. In 2012, an unexpected situation happened in the world of technology, now famously known as the Clone War. It all began when a Chinese company named GoPhone managed to get its hands on the schematics of the highly anticipated iPhone 5. These blueprints were leaked straight from the Foxconn factories, Apple's primary manufacturing hub. GoPhone quickly produced a clone of the iPhone 5, even before Apple's official launch. But GoPhone didn't stop here. They boldly filed a design patent for their iPhone clone in China, cleverly exploiting the loopholes in the country's intellectual property laws. Apple, furious and determined to protect its innovation, sued GoPhone in China. However, in China, national companies are always protected, so Apple lost the case. Until today, GoPhone continues creating Android knockoffs of the iPhone. Back in the day, the iPod click wheel supported games like Brick, Solitaire, and even downloadable titles like Tetris for $5. These were sold on iTunes but quietly discontinued as iOS and App Store rose. Like if you remember iPod games. Not a lot of people know, but Apple uses internal apps like Purple Restore to diagnose and manage devices during servicing. These tools never reach public hands. The most important one is Apple Connect, that lets workers sign into the company's network, which stores information for employees as well as their permissions. Interestingly, this app uses a gesture-based password, thing that Apple never added to iOS, probably due to being not secure enough. You install these apps with some sort of internal app store. Keep in mind that these apps are only used by people who work at Apple. These apps are not publicly available. Every good hero has a good origin story, and Clarus the dog cow is no different. For the original Macintosh, Jobs requested a development of custom fonts, and one of them was called Cairo. But this one had icons instead of text characters. The icon for the letter Z was this one, an animal that looked like a dog, but also like a cow. Then it was named Clarus the dog cow. In the era of the original Macintosh, Apple ventured into the printer manufacturing industry. In this context, Clarus held a significant role, appearing prominently in the page setup dialog box for numerous versions of the system's printer software. This feature served as a reminder to users about the orientation of their print job. In macOS Ventura, years later, Clarus is back where she belongs. In 2012, Apple Maps launched with critical bugs and missing locations. When Apple Maps replaced Google Maps, everything was chaotic. The software was so bad that the Australian police recommended not using it as it could cause accidents. Later, Tim Cook had to apologize for Apple Maps' fail. In 2017, Apple has promised a magic charger called the AirPower to charge multiple Apple devices on one pad with freedom of placement. Unfortunately, thermal issues and engineering challenges forced Apple to cancel the product in 2019, so we never saw this interesting product. Launched in 2010, iTunes Ping was Apple's attempt to create a music social network. Ping was announced by Apple CEO Steve Jobs as being sort of like Facebook and Twitter meet iTunes, but stating that Ping is not Facebook and it is not Twitter, instead describing it as something else, all about music. Many have speculated that iTunes Ping was meant to compete directly with declining MySpace, which was still holding on its existence through music. Despite initial excitement, iTunes Ping failed to gain traction and was shut down in 2012. This mysterious Apple prototype was rumored around 2018 and described as a secret hybrid device that blurred the line between iOS and macOS. Believed to feature a touchscreen and a detachable keyboard, it was speculated to run a custom OS combining elements of both macOS and iOS. This product would eventually become the iPad Pro with Magic Keyboard. Though it never launched, insiders believe that Apple worked on a touchscreen-based MacBook. To this day, no photos or specs have officially surfaced, only whispers and leaks. Released in early 1997, the eMate 300 was a rugged, translucent green clamshell laptop with a handle. It wasn't a Mac. Instead, it ran on a Newton OS, the same platform powering Apple's first tablet. Its design reflected that. The tough plastic shell could survive a backpack or a classroom drop. The built-in handle made it easy for kids to carry, and the flip-down keyboard protected the screen. It featured a low-power ARM processor, a stylus for handwritten recognition and drawing, and even rudimentary networking capabilities, crucial for computer labs. For a brief moment, the eMate 300 found a niche. When Steve Jobs returned to Apple in late 1997, he shut down the project. Ronald Wayne, Apple's lesser-known third co-founder, sold his 10% stake in Apple Inc. for just $800 12 days after the company was founded. Today, that share would be worth over $100 billion. When asked if he regretted selling stocks for $800, he said, "No. I did the best decision based on the information I had back in the day." So the dude lost literally $100 billion. Tier 5. Conspiracies and Myth.
You need to take Kathy to the airport by 2. You have a lecture at 4:15 on deforestation in the Amazon rainforest.
Right. Let me see the lecture notes from last semester. No, that's not enough. I need to review more recent literature. Pull up all the new articles I haven't read yet.
Journal articles only?
Fine.
Your friend Jill Gilbert has published an article about deforestation in the Amazon and its effects on rainfall in the sub-Sahara. It also...
Apple's 1987 Knowledge Navigator video imagined a futuristic digital assistant resembling today's Siri or ChatGPT. It featured a professor interacting with a voice-activated assistant using natural language, scheduling tasks, and accessing global databases. It's now seen as a prophetic vision of modern smart devices and AI, so Apple basically showcased the future back in the day. Acorn OS is rumored to be a secret alternative operating system developed by Apple for the original iPhone. Apple considered using this iPod-inspired interface named Acorn OS for the original iPhone. Leaked photos and videos show the prototype UI, which was ultimately rejected in favor of the current iOS, or as it was called back in the day, the iPhone OS. Numerous leaks and patents show Apple has experimented with foldable or clamshell iPhone prototypes. One prototype allegedly resembled a classic flip phone. While Apple hasn't released such a product, internal development of flexible displays and hinge mechanisms suggests they've at least exploited the idea.
Apple pulled a 99-cent iPhone game called Baby Shaker from its iTunes store. Its premise, quiet a crying baby with a vigorous shake, prompted outrage outside an Apple store in New York City.
Baby Shaker was a controversial and short-lived iOS game released in 2009, in which players had to shake their phone to stop a crying baby. The game was noticed by a founder of a non-profit organization, Stop Shaken Baby Syndrome, named Jennifer Dickens. She would later tweet about it and send the article for a press release to 30,000 media companies about the game. Many child advocacy groups accuse the app of both making fun and glorifying shaken baby syndrome, a form of brain injury that occurs when a baby or a toddler is shaken. Ironic or not, the game was even released around the same time of Shaken Baby Syndrome Awareness Week. Several people even contacted Apple to remove the app, which they did. One day later, Apple pulled Baby Shaker from the App Store. The app would reappear the next day before being taken down, this time forever. An Apple spokesman would later issue an apology in an interview. This application was deeply offensive and should not have been approved for distribution on the App Store. When we learned of this mistake, the app was removed immediately. We sincerely apologize for this mistake and thank our customers for bringing this to our attention. The app's developer would respond to the backlash on their website. They admitted it was a bad idea and the app was greatly lacking in taste. In 2014, a pixelated nightmare called Flappy Bird clogged the App Store. Overnight, the game became a global obsession. But several months later, Flappy Bird, the world's most addictive game, suddenly disappeared from the App Store, nearly a year after its launch. The game simply vanished, leaving behind itself a lot of mystery and unanswered questions. Why would its creator delete his own super popular iOS game that earned him $50,000 per day just from ad revenue? Despite high popularity and financial gains, Nguyen found himself in a personal and professional drama. His private life was shattered as he faced an overwhelming barrage of requests for interviews and media appearances, all eager to uncover the story behind the creator of the viral phenomenon. The pressure of overnight fame took an unexpected turn for Nguyen. Feeling the weight of anxiety and overwhelmed by unintended consequences of his creation, he made an astonishing and unprecedented decision that neither his fans nor the gaming community saw coming. In February of 2015, Nguyen decided to delete his own creation from the App Store forever. Flappy Bird disappeared from the App Store. By the way, I made a separate video about this topic. My iPhone has a camera, your iPhone has a camera, so everyone's iPhone must have a camera too, right? Wrong. There are certain iPhone models without front and rear cameras. Yes, you heard me right. There are some non-camera iPhones that are even more expensive than regular iPhones with a camera module. Actually, Apple never admitted manufacturing such devices, but they do exist, and I once had a chance to see such iPhone in real life. The answer is simple. Certain iPhones lack cameras because specific industries, such as the military or nuclear, do not allow cameras due to security policies. So not only does the camera have to be disabled, but the camera module has to be physically removed to prevent any chance of taking unauthorized pictures. Apple doesn't officially sell iPhones without cameras, but there are some third-party companies that are selling such custom devices for a pretty high price.
Where can I hide a dead body?
What kind of place are you looking for? Dumps, swamps, mines, reservoirs, or metal foundries?
In 2011, when original Siri was introduced on iPhone 4S, she once responded to a very morbid question: where can I hide a dead body? Siri responded with a list of suggestions such as swamps and other places where you could potentially hide a dead body. The feature was meant to be a simple joke, but later was removed after backlash and media attention. It's often cited as an example of Apple's experimentation with edgy AI responses during Siri's early development.
Let's try swamps.
This swamp isn't far from you.
A common conspiracy theory among tech communities tells that Apple intentionally leaks prototypes or design elements to test public reaction or create additional hype. While Apple is known for secrecy, the frequency of consistent leaks has led some to believe in controlled information releases, especially when rumors align with launch day reality. If they wanted to keep things private, they could, but I personally believe that Apple controls what is leaked and what is kept private. Leaks are used as a sort of test to see how people react to a new product or feature. Steve Jobs passed away on October 5, 2011. Despite official reports stating pancreatic cancer, some conspiracy theories suggest that he may have had AIDS. Someone shared his HIV test on WikiLeaks and it appeared to be positive. Well, take this information with a grain of salt, as we don't know if this HIV test was real or fake. One thing is sure, we really miss Steve. Another conspiracy theory claims that Steve Jobs faked his death and lives in Egypt. This rumor was inspired by a viral photo on Reddit. The picture was taken in Egypt several months after Steve Jobs passed away. We can see a man strangely resembling Steve Jobs. Well, this one is probably 100% fake, but the guy from the picture really looks like Steve Jobs in Egypt. Okay, this one is really weird. Contrary to popular myth, Touch ID won't unlock a phone with a dead person's finger due to loss of electrical conductivity and skin changes. So you cannot simply cut someone's finger and unlock his iPhone. It's not possible. For example, in 2016 in Florida, authorities tried to unlock an iPhone linked to a murder to resolve the crime investigation. They tried to unlock the phone by placing the finger of a dead person both on the crime scene and in the morgue. Both times, Touch ID failed to unlock the iPhone due to the loss of bioelectricity in the body. Prosecutors asked Apple to unlock the phone, but Apple refused, citing privacy policies. So the Touch ID has an accidental security feature. Your iPhone dies with you. I wonder if the same system applies to the Face ID, and probably yes, because to be able to unlock your iPhone, you have to open the eyes, and if you're dead, obviously your eyes are closed, so no one will be able to unlock your iPhone if you are dead. Using the phone while driving is pretty dangerous. It makes iMessage likely one of the deadliest software ever made. Yep, it's not a joke. iMessage caused more crash accidents than speeding. Okay, and the last one. This is a crazy one. A former Apple engineer, David Shayer, claims that in 2005, Apple helped the US Department of Energy create a custom iPod that could secretly record data, possibly even radiation levels. The device was modified to appear like a normal iPod, hiding its extra functionality. No one knows what happened to this iPhone and why Apple accepted making such device for the US government, probably for the surveillance or something like that, but one thing is sure, this is not fake. This iPod really existed, as at least 4 people are confirming this rumor. Thank you for watching this video. If you enjoyed, please like and subscribe. Peace.